On today's American Football Stories episode, we'll recap this weekend's college football action. American Football Stories is brought to you by Coach Paint. Coach Paint offers the ability to clearly telestrate video while increasing retention of information in a shorter amount of time. Up your game with Coach Paint today.
What time is it?
Game time!
It's gonna be special. They gonna talk about this forever.
Welcome to American Football Stories.
Puts his head down, crashes and spins, and dives. Touchdown!
Bringing together the many perspectives that make up college football in the NFL.
Football is one of the greatest sports ever invented.
From players and coaches.
Believe, baby, believe, baby.
Hey, we playing to win right here, fellas.
To the front office and scouts.
The public is finally beginning to catch up, but they don't even know half the truth.
Us against the world, let's get it.
Your hosts, Robert Parker and Nick Knudsen, bring you American Football Stories.
Welcome to American Football Stories, brought to you by Coach Paint. Today is September 27, 2020. I'm Nick Knudsen. I'm joined by Robert Parker. You ready to go, Rob?
Ready to go, Nick. How's it going?
It's going good, man. Solid weekend of football. The SEC is back, and, of course, we're diving into college football right now. But let's first start with acknowledging the postponed and canceled games, just kind of tracking those this weekend. I will start tracking those because that's a big part of the storyline of the sport this year. Notre Dame at Wake Forest postponed, moved to December 12th. Georgia State at Charlotte, Tulsa at Arkansas State, both postponed. Charlotte and Arkansas State, second week in a row, they're postponed. South Florida at Florida Atlantic in the Willie Taggart Bowl. That one's delayed, unfortunately. North Texas goes to Houston. Rob, the Cougars have tried to play 4 times, and for 4 straight times, luck was not on their side. Another postponement. They were supposed to play Rice, Memphis, Baylor, and North Texas. How about that for some luck?
Yeah, not so lucky for those Houston Cougars out there. Hopefully they can get on track and get the protocols and procedures down and everyone is healthy where they can, get back in the swing of things and start playing some games.
Yeah, I got to feel bad for that. That's just a bad break. But, again, like I said, I want to track this part of the sport because I think it's very much a part of our everyday lives right now still. So let's move on to the action at hand. Thursday, UAB defeated South Alabama 42-10 on Friday. Middle Tennessee State fell 37-35 to University of Texas San Antonio. On Saturday, the SEC got back in action. We'll start with the ranked teams. We'll go from there. Number 2, Alabama traveled to Mizzou. Welcome to the SEC, Eli Drinkwitz. Alabama Crimson Tide rolling into your house. Mac Jones goes for 249, 2 TDs. Najee Harris racks up 3 TDs. Tide rolls out to 35-3 lead when, unfortunately for all gamblers, Nick Saban took his foot off the gas. Alabama ends up winning 38-19. Rob, what are your thoughts on the Tide's opener?
Yeah, just like I said before, Nick, we talked about Alabama and we talk about Nick Saban. I think this could be a revenge tour for Nick Saban. I think Alabama wants to get back to the top, and pretty much if you watch them game 1, it seems like they haven't missed a beat. Mac Jones seems like he's going to handle the offense pretty well. He has weapons on the outside with Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle. Jalen Waddle, 2 touchdowns. Seems like he's fitting into that Henry Ruggs, Jerry Jeudy role. Alabama is just a mean team that seems like they have all the pieces that they need to pretty much win another national championship.
Yeah, the Tide are looking pretty solid, and based on what we saw in the rest of the SEC West, I'm not sure who's there to stand in their way, but it's only 1 week, so as you like to say, we shall see. Let's move on to Norman, the Big 12. The number 3 Oklahoma Sooners, for the second straight year, are upset by the Kansas State Wildcats. This time it's a Kansas State Wildcat team that lost to Arkansas State to open this season. Man, I picked Oklahoma to cover 28 in this one. Guess I don't know a whole lot about this. Spencer Rattler throws 3 interceptions. But, Rob, the Sooners did start out well. They were up 28-7.
Yeah, they start out on fire. But once again, the biggest knock on Oklahoma, we know, is not on the offense side of the ball. It's the defense side of the ball. So, I mean, the struggles on the defense side of the ball has, been prevalent the last couple years. But once again, I think Spencer Rattler played like a freshman. A couple untimely turnovers he had, especially the one late in the game, which was an overthrow. So I think, Spencer Rattler definitely started off hot, but towards the end of the game, he kind of cooled off and he kind of had some untimely throws that kind of cost him that game.
Yeah, Kansas State goes on a 17-0 run in the fourth quarter. And I mean, I had tuned out of this game. I was kind of keeping an eye on it early, but Oklahoma got out to such a big lead. I think I started hearing about it again when Kansas State cut the lead to 35-21 in the second half, but they used 17 straight fourth quarter points. Certainly tuned in for the final stretch when they were making their comeback, but 17 straight fourth quarter points. That's a bad loss if you're Oklahoma, and in a year with a shortened season, every loss is even more critical. It's going to be tough to go through these conference slates completely undefeated. I think maybe in Alabama could do it, but I'm not sure who else can. So maybe one late loss doesn't knock you out, but Oklahoma has no room for error if you want to talk about the college football playoff going forward. Speaking of a team that did not look too impressive, the Arkansas Razorbacks were up 7-5 at halftime against Georgia. Rob, did you happen to catch much of this game?
I did. I got a chance to catch a little bit of it. I just wanted to see how Felipe Franks was gonna, fare, especially in a new offense. Once again, it just seems like Felipe Franks, he has the talent, he has the big arm, but it just seems like, his progressions through the offense, no matter what offense he kind of seems to, not read his receivers. And he threw a costly pick six that kind of turned the momentum around in that game, if you ask me. And I think Georgia kind of won it on the defense side of the ball.
Yeah, I think I wrote that Felipe Franks was terrible, amazing, and completely average all in the same game, which is a lot of what Florida Gator fans were used to seeing. However, the Hogs defense, they come out, they play pretty tough. I mean, you held Georgia out of the end zone for the entire first half. I don't care if Georgia's got the seventh straight quarterback. This Georgia roster is loaded with 4- and 5-star talent, and Arkansas was a disaster last year. They were ranked 13th in the SEC on total offense and 14th in total defense. Barry Odom comes over as a defensive coordinator from Missouri. Art Briles' son, Kendall Briles, is the offensive coordinator under Sam Pittman. I like what Pittman's doing at Arkansas. He brings a lot of energy to that program. It's going to take a while to build up, but this was a good first start for them. I mean, they played right with them. They were up 10-5 in the third quarter before Georgia remembered they were Georgia and took over. DeJuan Mathis gets the start, gets pulled in the second quarter in favor of Stetson Bennett, who was last year's backup, but essentially was the fourth stringer behind Jamie Newman, JT Daniels, and DeJuan Mathis this season, Rob. 6 feet tall, knows the offense, has plenty of experience. But I don't know if I like Stetson Bennett's chances when you're going up against the big time in the SEC. I'll let him carry against the bottom dweller, but they got Auburn. They're playing Auburn next week, Rob.
Yeah, that's going to be a tough game for Georgia, especially if they can't figure out, the quarterback the quarterback position, whether it's going to be Bennett or Mathis, or maybe JT Daniels get cleared to play, and we may see JT Daniels at the helm. But once again, just like you said, that Georgia team is loaded with 4- and 5-stars. But for some reason on the offense side of the ball, it seems like one of their biggest playmakers is George Pickens on the outside, but they don't give him the ball enough. No. I don't know if it's, the offensive play calling that, they're scheming things. They're not scheming things around Pickens, but you have to give the ball to George Pickens. He's definitely one of the best receivers in the nation. He's definitely a playmaker. Worst case scenario, you throw the 50-50 balls. Either he comes up with it or he gets a flag. So I think you just have to incorporate Pickens in the offense a little bit more. And I think that running game gets going. But once again, if Georgia is one-dimensional, I think it's going to be a long season for them moving forward, Nick.
Yeah, I 100% agree with Pickens. He's an outstanding talent. I did see from what I saw, Mathis struggles in the passing game a little bit. Bennett is he's very serviceable, but he's not going to make those big throws that you need him to make, where you would like to see a quarterback make downfield to Pickens. So he can keep you in those intermediate routes with no problem. But those big downfield plays, which a receiver like Pickens is capable of. Probably not the best quarterback for a guy like Pickens. But what I just – again, we've talked about our frustrations with the way Georgia's handled quarterbacks. But if you're DeJuan Mathis and you get a look for a quarter and a half, you don't produce at all against Arkansas, do you think they go back to him next week? Because, I mean, he's 6'6". He really looks like he's got all the tools. What did you think about what you saw from him? He made a couple mistakes. He had a terrible throw in the red zone. He had a fumble, which ultimately was he recovered it, but that's ultimately where he ended up getting pulled, and they put Bennett in. But offense was just flat with him in there. Do you think he gets another look for Auburn, or do you think they just go with someone they trust if Daniels isn't cleared to play?
I mean, in my case, I hope he get another look. Just like you said, with Bennett, he's definitely serviceable. But with DeJuan Mathis, it gives you an extra element, especially he can use his legs.
He's got all the tools.
Yeah,
he's got all the tools to be a good quarterback.
Yeah, dual threat quarterback. I mean, you will want to see Mathis get another shot at it. Me personally, I think it was just first game, not a lot of reps. Jamie Newman was pretty much the uncut starter coming in, and he opts out. So now everything just got adjusted. So I think DeJuan Mathis kind of have to adjust to his role on the team as, hey, I might not be the starting quarterback, but I might be called on to play some snaps. So I think he just have to get mentally checked in and focused. But I think Kirby Smart goes back to him again and see what he got.
Georgia struggles, but they get it together. They end up winning 37-10, covering a 26-point spread thanks to a last-minute field goal, Rob. But if I'm a Georgia fan, I'm a little concerned. They got a stretch of games coming up. That's quite daunting. Starting with Auburn next week, we'll check in on that on our weekly picks on Wednesday and Thursday. But man, didn't like what I saw from the Bulldogs early on. I loved what I saw from the number 5 Florida Gators. Man, did Kyle Trask look good. He comes out. That offense didn't miss a beat from last year. If anything, it looked a little bit improved. But you got to take it with a little bit of grain of salt. Ole Miss was one of the worst defenses in the conference last year. They haven't played good defense there for a while. But Florida just moved the ball at will all day long, to the point, you think about all the great offenses that they had under Steve Spurrier and Urban Meyer. Spurrier's offense had the record for total yards in the SEC game in school history. They rack up 642 yards, which is a school record. Dan Mullen at the end of the game is saying, hey, I think Spurrier should send me – he's my neighbor down the street. I think he should send me a bottle of wine for that performance if I keep breaking his record. Spurrier responded later that night. He said, hey, if he wins the SEC, I'll send him 2.
Yeah, and I think that's what it comes down to is pretty much SEC East Championship or bust right now. Just like you said, the offense looks incredible. Kyle Trask, he was just pitching and catching out there. He definitely have weapons on the outside. I think one thing that surprised me was the use of Kadarius Toney in the slot as a true slot receiver. I don't think we ever seen that from Toney since he's been on campus. They were more using him more of a gadget type of player, but to see him actually work in the slot as a receiver, that was amazing. Not only for the offense, but for, I'm pretty sure, Florida fans as well. But the one thing that did I gave a side eye to was that Florida defense. You had some of your big time players on the defense side of the ball make mistakes or get beat, especially Kyra Elam in the backfield in the secondary. And I know Sean Davis getting ejected pretty much in the first possession of that game kind of probably messed up the ebb and flows of the secondary back there for the Florida Gators. What are your thoughts on that, Nick?
The secondary struggle, but this, again, was an Ole Miss offense. A lot of talent, man. And you got Lane Kiffin coming in, and Lane Kiffin's going to empty his bag of tricks. I think in the first quarter alone, we saw a throwback pass. Ole Miss, they had that one route where the guy looked like he was going to run to the outside. He cuts to the inside behind the safety, ends up tricking the safety basically, and just is a wide open touchdown for Ole Miss right up the middle there. Matt Corral ends up throwing for 395 yards, 3 touchdowns. For all the preseason talk we heard about John Rice Plumlee, man, Matt Corral was good. He can run too, man.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that surprised people the most as far as, we know what Plumlee can do. We've seen him what he did last year against that LSU defense. But Matt Corral, he can definitely get on his horse and he can definitely move around.
Yep.
I know he had one juke particularly in the game that kind of broke Kyrie Elam's knees, and he picked up the first down. So I was like, wow, Matt Corral can really, really run the ball. But once again, we knew he was going to play with a chip on his shoulder, especially, with all the off-field drama with the, committing to Florida, decommitting, committing to Florida again. So we kind of felt like, Matt Corral was definitely going to be pumped up and juiced up for this Florida game.
Yeah, I think you saw Ely, the running back, come out. He had a nice game, good performance. Snoop Connor for Ole Miss, Drummond at the wide receiver, Yeboah the tight end, Elijah Moore 10 receptions, 227 yards. They got talent and weapons. It's really, you don't want to give up 35 points, but let me tell you this: 14 of them were in the fourth quarter. You gave up 14 in the fourth quarter, so you held a pretty good offense to 21 going into the fourth here, and really, Ole Miss made it a little interesting. They recovered an onside kick late. I got to say, I think the key turning point of the game, too, that really put the Gators over the top. Florida was in control, but Ole Miss had a third down stop late where they were flagged. Florida did not convert, but Ole Miss brought a blitz off the edge. Guy tackles Trask. He basically just finishes the tackle, and they called it a penalty. I thought it was a terrible call. Florida caught a huge break, ends up going down the field, putting the game away with the touchdown, but Ole Miss caught a pretty bad break on that. I bet you some Rebels fans are going to talk about that call, Rob.
Yeah, definitely. I'm in agreement with you, Nick. I really thought it was a bad call. I know they call a personal foul, kind of driving the quarterback in the ground, but just like you said, he was just finishing the tackle, wrapping up.
Yeah.
Like, you really can't stop your momentum, mid tackle. So I thought it was a bad call, but once again, Florida capitalized off of it. So definitely a bad call. Ole Miss's way, but Florida capitalized off of it and put points up on the board. So, but once again, that Florida offense really look explosive. I know it's only game one, but I'm really excited to see what comes next.
416 yards passing for Trask, 6 touchdowns, no interceptions. We should be punched in the face because neither one of us has said the name of Kyle Pitts. I agree that Tony looked good. Tony was very physical. He kind of has like Kadarius Toney, a little bit Tyreek Hill vibes when he's healthy and going, right? But like Kyle Pitts, man, that's a first round talent you're watching. I'm trying to make a comparison to Pitts. I don't have a good comparison for anything we've seen in Gainesville at that Florida program with Kyle Pitts. He's just a freak. I mean, that 71-yard touchdown pass, the way he broke away, he not only was physical enough to break off the guy, but then he just outran him to the end zone.
Yeah, I think what we see in Kyle Pitts is a combination of a lot of players that came out the Florida program. I see a little bit of Dallas Baker in Kyle Pitts, especially when he lines up on the outside. I see a little bit of Ben Croup when he lines up in the inside. So yeah. I think he has flashes of all of those great Florida guys that came through the program, but what just separates him is just he's a mismatch problem, for opposing defenses because you can move him around the ball as much. And I know one thing that he kind of took to heart last year is that he didn't get a chance to be a nominee for the Mackey Award, which is the best award for tight ends because he didn't line up, in line enough. He was split out at the wide receiver position. So I think he in the offseason, he put on a little bit weight and he said, hey, he's going to take the challenge on to become a better inline blocker. So I saw that in game one, but once again, like when you get him on the outside, he's definitely a mismatch problem. That back shoulder throw when him and Kyle Trask hooked up, that was like amazing. That was perfect. That was almost Aaron Rodgers-ness, like, his back shoulder throws to his receivers that you see, pretty much every Sunday that Aaron Rodgers pulls off. So I thought that Kyle Trask to Kyle Pitts connection is definitely – it's going to be a deadly combination moving forward, Nick.
They're just comfortable in that offense. Mullen has everybody where he wants them to be. Trask hits 11 different guys, and even though Pitts had his 4 TDs, 8 receptions, 170 yards, by the way, Kadarius Toney stands out, but you get touchdown out of Trayvon Grimes. Copeland gets in on the action. A little bit of Trent Whitmore. Running back situation was pretty good with Pearson Davis. Really like this Florida offense going forward. They're scary good. after what we saw out of Georgia, Florida's a real contender in the East. Got to be worried if you're a Georgia fan watching that game. And Ole Miss also walk away from this game thinking Ole Miss is going to pull an upset somewhere.
Yeah, you have to, especially when you get in the type of quarterback play that you saw in Matt Corral. If he can keep that consistency up with that offense, with those weapons at the running back position, Elijah Moore, definitely one of the best, receivers in the nation as well. I think if that defense kind of can get going and get some stops, I think you're definitely going to see an upset in the near future. I think Lane Kiffin knows that, he's not going to win it all per se, but he wants to be competitive, and I think they can be competitive, especially with that firepower on the offense side of the ball, Nick.
Yep, great win for the Gators. And just when we think we can't see much better performance in the SEC at the quarterback position, 3:30 comes around. CBS is in Baton Rouge for the defending national champion LSU Tigers. Granted, LSU is LSU in name only right now because that roster has just had so much turnover. However, Ed Orgeron, great recruiter. Tigers are still loaded. So I don't think anyone was disrespecting them. Definitely Vegas wasn't with that 16.5 point spread they put out there. But the Pirate comes in his first SEC game. Mike Leach takes Stanford transfer KJ Costello and puts up a video game like 623 yards and 5 touchdowns. I mean, Costello it was 3-0 after the first quarter. Costello throws a pick 6, and after that, he just went lights out on the game. I mean, I was really impressed with this passing game, particularly Kylan Hill, the running back from Mississippi State out of the backfield. Osiris Mitchell had a great game as well, 7 receptions, 183 yards, and a couple TDs. But Kylan Hill out of the backfield, he's putting some good stuff on tape for the NFL.
Yeah, once again, I think, Colin Hill could have came out last year in the draft, but I think Mike Leach coming in, it kind of made his stock go up. We knew Colin Hill led the SEC in rushing last year, but one thing we didn't really see him do is catch the ball out the backfield. So within this air raid system, you're going to see him, run routes and catch the ball out the backfield and work on his pass catching, which is going to make him a complete back on the next level. And I think he did a wonderful job, especially in game 1 against a feisty LSU Tiger defense, Nick.
LSU has 2 games to get right against Vandy and Missouri before they go to the Swamp to play Florida. I liked Miles Brennan compared to the normal average quarterback in college football. I think he's definitely a decent quarterback. 345 yards passing, hit on some big plays. LSU was up a couple times in that second half before Mississippi State took control and pulled away. Miles Brennan can move that offense for the Tigers, but, I mean, this isn't Joe Burrow. We're not going to see a repeat of 2019. What was your impression of LSU's offense coming out the gate?
Once again, we talked about the turnover that they had, especially with the loss of the draft picks to the NFL this past season, and the number 1 receiver in the nation in Jamar Chase opting out. But just like you said, Ed Orgeron is a hell of a recruiter, so they have talent. Terrence Marshall really stepped up. He looks like he's the next guy up on that receiver group. He made a hell of a catch, in the back of the end zone, a one-handed catch where he was kind of getting held at the same time. And Miles Brennan definitely can move the ball, but you definitely got to see him settle in a little bit more. I think one thing that they were missing was the running game. You really didn't see LSU kind of run the ball like they normally do. I think that was the one element that there was missing. So if they can kind of get that running game down, I think LSU really doesn't miss a beat. But you have to tip your hats off to KJ Costello and Mike Leach and bringing the air raid in the SEC. I know LSU was missing Derek Stingley Jr. on the defense side of the ball in the secondary, but to get cut up like LSU did, that's kind of unacceptable. But that goes to show you the Mike Leach system, KJ Costello, and surrounding athletes that Mississippi State has on the offense side of the ball. So I think LSU looks good, maybe not as good as the championship LSU football team of last year, because that was a historic season for them, but they still have talent. And me personally, I thought that was a game that LSU shouldn't have lost. But, KJ Costello and Mike Leach just had a great game plan against those guys.
Yeah, I got to think LSU bounces back from this one. If you have a limited preseason, I think one of the opponents in the SEC you'd want to at least see on your schedule coming out the gate is a brand new Mike Leach system within your conference. I don't think that's the one you want to see right out the gate, Rob.
Yeah, I mean, once again, just having an air raid, a type of attack in the SEC is going to be fun to watch. And I think a lot of these SEC schools is going to have to adjust because, they're just so used to playing in the box, just playing the run and playing the play action passes in the RPOs. But Mike Leach just spreads the ball around so much, and he attacks you vertically. So you have to be on your P's and Q's every play because, he might hit you over the top with a big one. And that's what kind of happened to LSU. They got hit over the head with a couple big plays. KJ Costello threw some dimes in the back of the end zone for touchdowns. So I just think that LSU just, not so good of a matchup in week one because of the coaching styles and the system fits. But once again, I think LSU rebounds next week. And we're going to see LSU. They're going to be okay. They're not lacking for talent. They're going to do okay moving forward.
Yeah, super exciting upset in week one. Defending national champions go down. I think they said it was the first time since Michigan lost in 1998 that a defending national champion lost on the opening weekend. Big entrance to Mike Leach to the SEC. I loved after the game they asked him, how does it feel to pull this upset, Leach? And he basically was like, well, it's Leach is always like super calm, but he just kind of got that style where he kind of drones on a bit. Well, it's certainly better than average, better day than average. Something. It's like, okay. So Leach is going to make the SEC West even more fun. And then you got Lane Kiffin, which we got to see firsthand with Florida what he's going to do. So the state of Mississippi is going to be playing some good football, and we don't talk about them much, but Jackson State hiring Deion Sanders. Can you have a more interesting group of coaches in one state?
Yeah, I don't think you can. There's a lot of personality out there in Mississippi, if you ask me, Nick. Once again, you mentioned Mike Leach, Deion Sanders, and Lane Kiffin, like those personalities. So I'm pretty sure there's a lot of high school players that's tuned in that's saying, hey, I might have to make a trip out to Mississippi.
Yeah, man, it's gonna be some fun times watching them develop those programs. Good win for Mike Leach right out the gate. Congrats to the Bulldogs. LSU, they'll bounce back. Kentucky at Auburn. Auburn ends up winning this game 29-13. Man, I think everyone was picking Kentucky. By the time the game kicked off, Rob, Kentucky was down from, I think at one point during the week, they were 8.5-point dog to +3.
Yeah, that line significantly moved over the course of the week. Once again, I really like Auburn in this game. Once again, year two with Bo Nix at the quarterback helm. They still have weapons on the outside, and Anthony Schwartz and Seth Williams. We're going to talk about those touchdowns that he kind of mossed those defenders on. But I really like Auburn in this one. But just like we talked about, Mark Stoops is building a hell of a program out there in Kentucky, and Terry Wilson coming back from injury last year. Now you have a true quarterback at the quarterback helm, and you don't have Lynn Bowden. But we know the season he had last year. But Terry Wilson proved to show you that, hey, I haven't missed a beat, but Kentucky came up short, and Auburn kind of got the win, but it wasn't the score was definitely not an indicator of how close that game was.
Man, it was 15-13. Auburn was up 15-13 early in the fourth quarter when Kentucky fumbled the ball in their own territory. Auburn turns that into a touchdown. They go up 22-13, and on the next possession, Kentucky decides to fake a punt, which it was 4th and 5 from their own 30. It was terribly run, terribly executed. Auburn stuffs that, puts it in the end zone, goes up 29-13, and really just the score doesn't look as you're right. The score is not indicative of how close this game actually was played on the field. So Kentucky played right with Auburn into the fourth quarter. A couple of mistakes cost them the game. But still a tough bunch out of Lexington. And Auburn gets ready to play Georgia next week. That should be – we don't get those games in week 2 of the SEC schedule very often.
Yeah, we don't. And I know we talked about the SEC kind of being a gauntlet, but, having a 10-game, conference-only schedule is definitely a true gauntlet, especially with no off-season to kind of prepare you for this and get your body and your mind right. So this is really going to be a true testament of who is the best coming out the SEC this year.
Yeah, we will be paying attention to that one next week. All right, you got in the Big 12, Texas. Texas did everything they could to blow this one and give it to Texas Tech. I was super confident that the Horns would go in to Lubbock and just roll in this game. Instead, they were losing 56-41 with about 4 minutes to play. But Texas scores. They convert on an onside kick. They get a 2-point conversion. And then they end up winning 63-56 in overtime. I might not be doing enough justice with that quick of an explanation, but we got other games to get to here on this show. I want to know your thoughts, Robert, on what are you feeling if you're Texas Tech if you're this one, and what are you feeling if you're Texas?
Yeah, if you're Texas Tech, you definitely you're kicking yourself in the foot because you definitely could have had a win. But once again, if you're Texas, you fought back. Sam Ehlinger had a hell of a game. Caden Stearns comes up with the late interception to kind of seal that victory. But Texas had to fight. I know all the offseason talk year in and year out is if it's Texas back. I don't think Texas is back. But it was definitely an entertaining game, back and forth, high scoring game. But it's no way that Texas Tech really should, take the Longhorns to the wire like that, especially with all the talent that's on that Longhorn roster. But it's going to be growing pains. They did lose a lot to the draft. One of their leading receivers in Devin Duvernay. But once again, Texas just, they have so much talent that you wouldn't think it would be a back and forth game with Texas Tech. But you tip your hats off to the Red Raiders because they definitely came in ready to play.
Ehlinger goes for 5 touchdowns. Bowman on the other side for Texas Tech also threw 5 touchdowns, but he threw 3 interceptions along with that. Joshua Moore for the Horns hauls in 3 touchdown catches with 73 yards. Good comeback win by Texas. Hey, a lot of this season is going to be survive in advance. So, sometimes it's going to look ugly. And if you come out with the win, that's all you really need. I'm sure LSU would have been happy with an ugly win in that game against Mississippi State. So good on Texas for surviving and advancing. I think it's going to hurt them a little bit, though, in the polls. When you kind of start comparing, you want to get, picky and compare things with less games. You'd like to see Texas go in there and take care of business a little better than they did. But they got the win. That's the important part. In previous years, this might be a game that this Texas team drops. So good on them for doing that. Another ugly performance out of the state of Texas as we bounce back to the SEC. Man, Texas A&M, another big favorite that I thought wouldn't have much of a problem covering because the Vanderbilt that I watched last year didn't play much offense. And I realized that Vanderbilt's been playing some pretty good defense in Nashville, but not good enough to shut down what is supposed to be an Aggies team that's ranked in the top 10 and should be looking to compete in the SEC West. Maybe with LSU down, this is your time to kind of strike and become the top challenger to Alabama. Instead, much like Georgia, you play down to your competition. It's 7-5 at halftime, exactly like Georgia. And you come out in the second half, you end up going up 14-5, score a touchdown. But just ugly performance all the way around. It's going back and forth. It just seemed like that the Aggies just never could pull away at any point. They end up losing 3 fumbles in this game. Kellen Mond only passes for 189 yards. I gotta go back and watch this from start to finish, but this just looks like a puke-worthy performance.
Yeah, Nick, you're right. I didn't get a chance to, watch this game from kickoff to, the whistle blowed. But one thing that we talked about, before the season even started especially with Texas A&M, is Kellen Mond in the quarterback position. We know that Texas A&M is only going to go far as Kellen Mond takes them. If he plays like the Kellen Mond of, his freshman year, then Texas A&M is going to fare well. But if he doesn't, then, Texas A&M is going to struggle. But you don't expect them to struggle with Vanderbilt. But just like we said, it was the opening week of the SEC, no really off season, no spring practice. So you're going to see a lot of shaky performances. So maybe you count this as a one-off, but I know Jimbo Fisher came out after the game and he kind of took the onus on himself and said, hey, it's my fault. We played terrible. It's on me. I'm the head coach, pretty much. I make all the money, so I'm taking the blame, but we're going to get it. We're going to make some adjustments and we're going to get it done moving forward. So I thought that was really, really good on Jimbo Fisher's part. But one thing, it seems like Jimbo Fisher somehow can't create the magic that he created at Florida State with Texas A&M. I don't know. What is your take on that, Nick?
Well, I don't think he's I was about to say he doesn't get to play Duke. He doesn't get to play Duke in North Carolina and all those all the ACC competition he's used to playing. But he did get to play Vanderbilt, and that didn't go so well, I guess. But Texas A&M, they're just a little buried right now. They really, I think a lot of people recognize that they have talent and that they're really building something out there. I question whether or not Mond is the guy at this point. I think we've seen enough of him to say that he's made incremental improvement each year, but he's not really, we're not talking about like a Joe Burrow jump, like, which doesn't really exist. But I mean, you even see Kyle Trask look a lot more comfortable. I'm interested to see how he plays. Maybe this team wasn't totally focused. It was Vanderbilt. They got Alabama, Florida, and now Mississippi State coming up the next 3 weeks. I don't think Vandy was their main focus of the offseason. They may have overlooked this team. Derek Mason plays scrappy. I mean, we almost saw Derek Mason get in a fight with Dan Mullen along the sideline a couple years ago up in Nashville. Vanderbilt had a 21-0 lead early against the Gators on that day. Vandy's good for a couple of games a year where they'll give opponents a hard time. But I was looking for a statement game out of Texas A&M, knowing that Alabama and Florida are coming up next.
Yeah, I think I'm thinking along those same lines, Nick. But once again, even if Texas A&M was looking forward past Vanderbilt, you still kind of want to get that game under your belt and execute. And for Texas A&M just didn't execute. They had a couple of turnovers. The offense just looked stagnant. The defense, they were missing tackles here and there. So once again, hopefully Jimbo Fisher revamps everything and have the Aggies ready to go to play next week. But once again, it really seems like Kellen Mond is making a little bit of progress, but it seems like he's definitely regressed a little bit, if you ask me. And I'm just go back and say it. This Texas A&M team, it only goes as far as Kellen Mond takes them.
Nobody's going to fully give them they're not going to get the stamp of approval like they belong until they win a big game. They got to beat an Alabama. They got to beat a Florida. They got to have that signature win. And I know they beat Burrow and LSU a couple years ago in that 7 overtime classic where Ed Orgeron got the Gatorade bath a little early. But that's a good win, but that's not when you're playing Alabama for the SEC West title big. It's a nice win between two teams that weren't going to go to Atlanta. But I think Jimbo needs to get some quality wins, and that hasn't happened yet. So once that happens, we can start talking about Texas A&M like one of the big boys. Until then, they're still kind of that second-tier status. So big opportunity in the next 2 weeks. A&M, you take out Alabama and Florida, and you might be the number one team in the country 3 weeks from now. So you got your opportunity. It's right here in front of you, Kellen Mond. Go get it. I'm not optimistic, though, based on what I'm seeing. If there's another group that shares a level of low optimism right now, Jimbo Fisher's former team, the Florida State Seminoles, they went into Miami and absolutely got smacked. I think most people saw this coming from a mile away. Miami was up at 38-3 at halftime, though. I'm not sure I thought it was going to be this ugly. 52-10 is your final. D'Eriq King goes for 267, 2 TDs. Just 300 yards through the air, 200 yards on the ground, over 500 yards for the Hurricanes on the night. Saw a couple appearances. I think we saw how many appearances? We got 3 appearances for 3 appearances for the turnover chain, 3 interceptions for the Hurricanes. So, Rob, this game was pretty terrible. We don't need to dissect a lot about this game. I want to ask a hypothetical instead. We talk about coaches maybe getting fired prematurely, and I think Willie Taggart's got a great case for that at Florida State. I know how bad it was at Florida State. I know this program is reeling right now, and I mean, you can just see it in the quality of play, particularly along the offensive side of the ball. I just think, though, if you keep Taggart around, you got Kendall Briles in as your offensive coordinator. I'm going to ask a hypothetical here. A Willie Taggart recruit, Jeff Sims, quarterback at Georgia Tech. Does he look pretty good so far?
Yeah, he's looked
all right.
really, really good so far.
Okay, and then a guy by the name of De'Aaron King has Houston connections with Kendall Briles. De'Aaron King, is he a Florida State Seminole if Kendall Briles is still in Tallahassee? You know, I it's a total hypothetical, but my point is this. You fired Willie Taggart because he's the worst thing that ever happened to your program, according to a lot of Florida State fans. But it was after 2 years. And in the program, Jimbo left that thing a mess in a lot of ways. And Taggart had to go in and clean up things. And people were critical of how he managed. They said he didn't recruit as well as his reputation. But I look at where Florida State's at right now. You're at least 3 years away from competing on the level you expect to as Florida State right now. You have to totally rebuild this offensive line. And, man, I can't tell you how many pouty faces I saw on the sideline. Did you see that one guy that had his he looked like a little kid. He had, like, his, like, chin and his shoulder pads. He looked like a little turtle. Did you see that guy on the sideline? Or did you flip it off by that point?
Yeah, to your point, you know, we talk about Willie Taggart, we talk about, you know, his recruiting reputation that he's had. And Mike Norvell, I mean, we know he didn't attend the game due to tested positive for COVID.
Right.
Maybe that could have been a factor.
I'm sure it didn't help.
Yeah. So definitely have to throw that in as a variable as why Florida State kind of played the way they played. But just like you said, I didn't see a beat down like this, 52-10. I mean, when you think about the Miami-Florida State rivalry, you think about the 80s and the 90s, you thinking about, you know, the hard-hitting games, the wide rights, the going down to the wire, and this wasn't it. It just seems like Miami is so much far ahead of Florida State right now, which, you know, the tables have turned. You know, couple years when Jimbo was at Florida State, it just seems like Florida State was so far ahead of Miami, and Miami had to catch up. Now the tables has turned. So I think we're seeing the pendulum swing back to Miami, and this was a big game for Miami, especially on the recruiting trail for South Florida. So I think, you know, Manny Diaz and the Hurricanes and the Hurricane fan base definitely won on the field and off the field in this one, if you ask me, Nick.
Yeah, I just thought I saw a lot of examples. I mean, Marvin Jones was frustrated on the sideline. And granted, these guys are extremely frustrated, but keep in mind, this is this FSU program that's had multiple players go to Twitter in the offseason and call out their coaches for something or one thing or another. And I'm like, we've talked about this, Rob. I'm all for player empowerment. I think the college game's completely screwy. The fact that even players, there's got to be a way to figure out how to pay them. There's got to be a way to figure out a lot of things. I'm very pro player. But I'm also, and maybe this is like I got Sicilian in my blood, keep it in-house, man. You got a problem with the coach, I don't care if you go behind closed doors and have it out with the coach. Call him every name in the book if you want. I don't care if you got a problem with something. But this going to Twitter, like these Twitter tough guys, like to me, there's a problem with the leadership on this team in general. I don't think it's Mike Norvell's problem. I think it's a problem that's existed before Willie Taggart got there. Taggart didn't get enough time to fix it, and now Norvell's got this mountain of a problem he's got to deal with. I don't know if he's going to get it ever even dig out of this at Florida State.
Yeah, going back to just what you said about Jimbo, you know, Jimbo kind of left the program in despair, if you ask me. You know, he did win the national championship, but at the end of the day, I really think he left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouth when he left. Yep. And the Florida State just haven't been winning on the recruiting trail. I mean, a lot of that is due to, the uptick of Clemson, and a lot of those, South Florida guys going to Clemson, or a lot of those guys going to the SEC and playing with Alabama or Florida or Georgia. So it's a lot of those recruits that Florida State would normally get that's kind of, skipping out on, Tallahassee right now. And I think Mike Norvell has to bring that back if they want to be competitive moving forward. But right now, that from the top to the bottom, it looks bad. It really looks bad. You can't get beat 52-10 by your rival, especially in a shortened season like this, COVID year where everyone is craving football, and the fan base is just rabid. You can't get beat 52-10 because all eyes are on it. And, hopefully Mike Norvell gets a longer chance to turn this around than Willie Taggart did. But for me, it kind of seems like it's going to be the same thing moving forward.
Yeah, and I feel a little bad that we spent all the time talking about Florida State here. This just was like one of those, like, I think this is a significant moment, and it could be a turning point one way or another for the next few years. I think it's going to be a significant marker for this program. Miami, Rhett Lashley, love what they're doing. They got off next week, but they go up to Clemson. Robert, with this offense, I feel foolish for even asking, but with this level of offense, if the Hurricanes defense goes in, creates a couple turnovers, do you have confidence in this offense to keep up with Clemson in a couple weeks?
I do, and the main reason for that, Nick, is D'Eriq King. And when you have a dual threat quarterback that can beat you with his arms and can beat you with his legs, it's gonna be hard to beat a team that can win. So I just think D'Eriq King just brings a new dimension to this Miami offense that they haven't had in a while. Especially, just like I said, he can beat you with his arm and he can beat you with his legs. So if Miami defense can kind of hold up against Trevor Lawrence or come up with some timely, plays on the defense side of the ball, I think Miami can pull off the upset. But I don't think Miami is back right away. But if Miami knocks off Clemson, maybe you can kind of hear the rumblings a little bit more that Miami and the U is finally back. But I have to see it to believe it. But don't get me wrong, I really think Miami can kind of keep up with Clemson, Nick. But once again, we will see moving forward. I think Trevor Lawrence is just, he hashtag we want to play. I think he's playing with a chip on his shoulder. I think he's playing to say, hey, I want to compete. I want to be out here competing. I am the best quarterback in the nation, and I'm going to go out and prove it. So it's going to be a good game, I tell you that. But once it get close, we're definitely going to dive in and go in depth with that particular game, Nick.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one. For Miami fans, we will be talking more about you in the coming weeks. I promise. Sorry to focus so much on Florida State here because this was a great night. You guys got all the attention on Saturday night, though. Good win for Miami, 52-10. Let's stay in state in Florida. UCF wins 51-28. Dillon Gabriel, they beat East Carolina, by the way, in conference play. Dillon Gabriel goes for 408 yards, 4 touchdowns. Typical UCF, never challenging this one. Knights roll. The only question I have for you from this game, Robert, is do we start seriously considering Dillon Gabriel for Heisman with these numbers? Because they're just outrageous.
I mean, he's definitely in the conversation. You definitely have to put him in the conversation. But once again, I don't think he have to put an amazing performance together, and they will have to pretty much go undefeated in order for him to win it. But once again, he's definitely in the conversation if you ask me, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, if he puts it, he's got to essentially do an entire season of what he's done the first 2 games. But man, I love watching this UCF football team. I know everyone rips on them, and their online presence is annoying as anything, but I went to a game of the Bounce House a couple years ago when they played Cincinnati. That thing moves, man. It really is it's named that for a reason. But I was very impressed with the fan base there. It's a big school. It's the biggest. I think it's the biggest attendance in the country. It's like over 50,000 students. So it makes sense that the football team is great, but just their style of play is so fun. I wish they'd get out there and be able to play a little more teams not named East Carolina, because these games are they're out of hand. But it'd be fun to watch if Gabriel gets gets to sneak into that Heisman race. So that's one thing to watch with UCF going forward. Army went to Cincinnati. This was the best non-Power 5 game of the day on my radar. And it ended up being Army didn't really show up and play much offense here, Rob. They recovered a fumble on their first possession, returned it for a touchdown. Army took a 7-0 lead early. But then the Cincinnati Bearcats, they kept Army out of the end zone. Army looked like a terror the first 2 games of the season. It's got to be a disappointing showing for the Black Knights.
Yeah, definitely, Nick. Once again, it was kind of slow going for Army this week. But I think Cincinnati, from top to bottom, it's a good team. It's a solid team. And I don't think they can compete on a national level yet. But once again, Cincinnati is one of those teams, kind of like UCF. Like you kind of see them coming. They're making strides year in and year out. And hopefully they get to that point where they can kind of compete consistently year in and year out. But Cincinnati has talent. They have talent in that area. I think, we just need Cincinnati to play those big time matchups so you can really see, the competition, the competition that they have and that they can bring, Nick.
All right, out in the Big 12, not a super exciting game, but Oklahoma State rides a 20-point second quarter to a 27-13 win over West Virginia. West Virginia hung around. They brought it back within a touchdown in the fourth quarter, but Oklahoma State scores on a Chuba Hubbard 23-yard run with 1:17 left to cap off an 80-yard drive, 15-play, 80-yard drive. And the Cowboys walk out 2-0 with 27-13 victory. Any thoughts on this one, Rob?
Yeah, I think we have to lead with no Spencer Sanders for this game at the quarterback position. He went down that Tulsa game in week 1. Yep. But Chuba Hubbard kind of got going. The first week they kind of had him bottle up, but he got going this week. And Oklahoma State, that offense looks like is going to be rolling how Mike Gundy normally has it. So great win for Oklahoma State.
I'm kind of mad at them for the 22-point non-cover against Tulsa. So I'm a little bit holding a grudge for a couple more weeks. I'll get over it. They'll pay me back at some point. South Carolina hosting Tennessee. The curse of Muschamp. It almost came back and bit the Vols. Will Muschamp, as a head coach, is 7-1 against Tennessee. The Volunteers finally broke through and beat their nemesis last year for the first time. Jeremy Pruitt follows up, does it again, 31-27 Vols. But Tennessee, made it interesting late. I mean, South Carolina kind of hung with them throughout the game, but Tennessee had a 21-7 lead early in the third quarter. South Carolina, every time Tennessee tried to pull away, South Carolina would just inch back. And I'll tell you what, Rob, in South Carolina, they got this running back. They got this running back I was watching. He had 13 carries. Kevin Harris, 13 carries for 55 yards and a touchdown. Dude's a big guy. Knows how to run. Like, he's not a guy you really want to hit in the open field.
Yeah, Nick. Excuse me, Nick. Yeah, I think, this was a great game. This is probably one of the most underrated games of the SEC week 1 coming back, Nick. I thought it was very competitive on both sides of the ball. Tennessee, come out at the end with the victory against South Carolina. But I think, these two teams is definitely going to knock off a big team down the line. They're going to shake some stuff up within the SEC. I think, Jeremy Pruitt has this Tennessee team believing in itself again. And they're a very resilient bunch, and they came out with the win. So, tip your hats off to Tennessee and Jeremy Pruitt for kind of turning this thing around.
Well, some controversy at the end of the game. Muschamp settles for a field goal despite being down by 7. They have 4th and 12 at the I believe it was the Tennessee 28-yard line. Could have gone for the 4th and 12, but decided to kick the field goal. A lot of people were critical of that on Twitter, I saw. So Tennessee gets the ball back. South Carolina holds them to a punt, and then South Carolina ends up fumbling the punt. Tennessee recovers, end the game. So the Volunteers, they start on 1. They go to Missouri. They play Missouri, and they get Georgia in 2 weeks. South Carolina, unfortunately, they go to the Swamp to play the Gators. We'll see how that Muschamp defense holds up against the number 3 Gators in that big-time offense we saw on Saturday. BYU, number 18, defeated Troy 48-7. Louisiana, they were in trouble, man. They almost lost that. Georgia Southern was up 18-17 late. Georgia Southern had a nice comeback. Louisiana finds another way to survive. They struggled with Georgia State last week too. 20-18 to stay 3-0. Virginia Tech, correct me if I'm wrong, but were they missing more than 20 players for this one? They end up beating NC State 45-24.
Yeah, I think the actual number was 23 players.
Unbelievable.
I mean, that is a lot, and you still come up with the win. That just goes to show you the heart of that Virginia Tech team. Great win for them. Great win for the Hokies. However, I think the ACC is a 2-team race between Clemson and Miami right now. But great win for the Hokies.
Yeah, it tells you a lot about that NC State team too, man. One ACC team that improved to 3-0 here, the Pittsburgh Panthers. They tough-fought battle with Louisville. They're kind of back and forth throughout the game. They mostly were in the lead throughout this one, but Louisville was hanging right with them, including they had the ball one final possession. The Panthers defense had to stand firm, but Pat Narduzzi's bunch advances to 3-0. Do you see them building like a Michigan State style program out there in Pittsburgh, Rob?
Yeah. I mean, I think they have a solid quarterback in Pickett. And I just think you can see Pittsburgh, kind of getting some big time recruits here and there, and kind of competing and being that tough out within the ACC. Kind of how Virginia Tech used to be under Frank Beamer, where they're never going to win the national championship or win it all, but they're going to have a consistent, solid team year in and year out, and they're going to win those big time games here and there. So I can kind of see the same type of feel around that Pittsburgh program.
All right, let's go to the rapid fire finish to finish up the college football episode. Georgia Tech drops one to Syracuse 37-20. Can't follow up with the expectations. A little disappointing if you're a Georgia Tech fan. Syracuse capitalized on some mistakes and took it to them. 37-20 Orange. Appalachian State beats Campbell 52-21. Liberty 36. FIU 34. Iowa State goes down to Fort Worth and beats the Horned Frogs. TCU 34. Iowa State 37. Tulane 66. Southern Miss 24. UTEP 31. ULM 6. Virginia gets an 18-point win over Duke 38-20. Boston College was down 21-7 against Texas State. Ends up coming back, improving to 2-0 with the 24-21 win. Louisiana Tech 66. Houston Baptist 38. SMU 50. Stephen F.A. Austin 7. Baylor crushes Les Miles of Kansas 47-14. And Rob, I'll give you one shot at some final thoughts on college football Saturday you just witnessed.
Yeah, Nick, I was just excited to see the SEC play. You had some great games, you had some upsets, you had some blowouts, but once again, the SEC is definitely hands down the best conference in my opinion. I know I'm an SEC homer. A lot of other conferences going to kill me. But once again, I was just so excited to see the SEC come back. It just felt normal. Definitely for me personally, my day just felt normal just sitting on the couch watching football all day, Nick. So I was glad to have some SEC football to watch.
Yeah, it did feel like college football is really, really back. I'm still missing the Big Ten. Love to hear that the Pac-12, the MAC, and the Mountain West are also planning returns this season. So good to see that people are getting back on board to playing some football. All right, Rob, let's move on to the Did You Know? And I know we spent a little time talking about them in the episode, but it's going to focus on the Florida State Seminoles because though it seems low right now, it's really going to illustrate the consistency of the program at Florida State. So our Did You Know question of the day is brought to you by CoachMate. How many times has Florida State missed a bowl game since 2000? Now, I'll give you a hint. Jimbo took over for Bobby Bowden in 2010. American Football Stories is brought to you by CoachMate. CoachMate offers the ability to clearly tell a straight video while increasing retention of information in a short amount of time, Up your game with Coach Paint today. All right, we're back. Rob, how many times has Florida State missed a bowl game since the year 2000? And my hint for you was that Jimbo took over for Bobby Bowden in 2010.
I know the level of consistency that came out of the Florida State program has been really, really good. I know it kind of died down over the last couple of years. So for his bowl games since 2000, I'm gonna go with 3, Nick. I'm gonna go with 3.
They've only missed one time, and that was the first year of Taggart. The Noles went 5-7 that year. Just to give you a little context within the state, Miami's missed 3 bowl games in that stretch. Florida's only missed 2, and UCF's missed 8. Of course, UCF hasn't really taken off until the last 5 years or so, but just to give you context, like Florida State, it's been a rough couple of years for them since Jimbo left, but they're still putting out a good product most years, even though it's not at their level. So it's not looking like this might be the second year since 2000 they're going to miss. I don't see a lot of wins on that schedule for the Seminoles this year, but I just wanted to put that out there after a difficult weekend for Florida State fans.
Yeah, I mean, once again, just like you said, they only missed 1 bowl game since 2000. That's really impressive. I'm pretty sure a lot of programs out there would love to have that stat underneath their belt. But once again, Florida State, they live and they play with a higher standard, national championships or big time bowl games. So once again, Florida State has to get back to that level. But once again, they have been a consistent program. That was a great trivia question on that one, Nick. Only missed 1 bowl game appearance since 2000. Wow.
Yeah. All right. You want to read us out?
Once again, Nick, great episode. We just want to, thank our listeners for joining us. Once again, follow us on YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes, and join us in next week's episode. Thank you.